Let me tell you something straight up. This isn't just another corporate buzzword we're throwing around. This is real, this is raw, and this is about the kind of leadership that changes companies, careers, and lives. You want to build a business that thrives. You want to lead people who are not just showing up for a paycheck, but are actually invested in the mission. Then listen close, because what I'm about to tell you might be the missing piece you didn't even know was missing. It's called psychological safety, and it starts right here in the boardroom. Now, I've seen too many boardrooms where people sit around like they're waiting for permission to breathe. They nod their heads, smile at all the wrong moments, and keep their mouths shut because they're scared to speak up. That's not leadership. That's groupthink wearing a suit and tie, and let me tell you, groupthink doesn't build empires. It builds disasters waiting to happen, because when nobody feels safe enough to say what needs to be said, bad decisions get made, missed opportunities pile up, risks go unnoticed, and before you know it, your company is on the front page for all the wrong reasons. But here's the truth. Great strategy comes from great conversations, and great conversations only happen when people feel safe enough to have them. Psychological safety isn't about being nice or politically correct. It's about creating an environment where every voice matters, especially the ones that don't always fit into the echo chamber. It's about building trust so deep that someone can stand up and say, "This plan is flawed," without fearing for their job. That's not weakness, that's strength, that's leadership. You see, money doesn't lie, but people do. And when you create a space where people feel free to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, you start making decisions based on reality, not perception. And that's how you build long-term success, because let's face it, businesses fail not because they run out of money, but because they run out of honest conversations. So if you're sitting in a boardroom and wondering why your strategies aren't sticking, ask yourself this: are we fostering open dialogue, or are we silencing dissent? Because the difference between mediocrity and excellence often comes down to one simple question: do people feel safe enough to speak up? Now, I want you to think back to the very first time you ever took a risk in business. Maybe it was quitting your job to start something new. Or maybe it was walking into a meeting with a proposal that felt way outside your comfort zone. Either way, you were probably scared. Your heart was pounding, your palms were sweaty, and you were second, guessing everything you were about to say. But here's the thing, you did it anyway, and that's exactly what psychological safety is about. It's not about eliminating fear, it's about giving people the courage to move forward despite it. In today's fast-paced, hyper-competitive business world, the ability to make smart, timely, strategic decisions is more important than ever. And those decisions don't come from a single person in a corner office. They come from teams that collaborate, challenge each other, and push boundaries. But none of that happens unless there's a culture of psychological safety. Without it, you're flying blind. You're making decisions based on half-truths, assumptions, and political maneuvering instead of facts, insights, and diverse perspectives. Let me give you a real-world example. Imagine two boardrooms. In one, the CEO dominates the conversation. People agree with everything he says. No one dares to challenge him. The stock price is up, so everyone thinks they're doing great. But behind the scenes, problems are brewing. Supply chain issues are getting worse. Customer satisfaction is dropping, and no one wants to bring it up because they don't want to be the bearer of bad news. So the company keeps doubling down on the same strategy until, boom, it collapses under its own weight. Now imagine the other boardroom. Here, the CEO actively encourages debate. He asks tough questions. He invites junior team members to share their thoughts. When someone raises a concern, he listens. He values honesty over harmony. And as a result, the team catches red flags early. They pivot quickly. They innovate constantly. They build a company that doesn't just survive. They thrive. Which boardroom do you want to be in? Which leader do you want to be? I'll tell you, this entrepreneurship in America wasn't built by yes men. It was built by rebels, risk takers, and people who weren't afraid to say things that needed to be said. The people who started businesses in garages, basements, and coffee shops didn't wait for permission to disrupt industries. They saw problems, they spoke up, and they acted, and guess what? That same spirit of entrepreneurship is alive and well, but it only flourishes when people feel safe enough to take risks. You want innovation? Then you better be ready to tolerate some discomfort. You want growth? Then you better be willing to hear things you don't want to hear, because the fastest way to kill creativity is to silence it. And the fastest way to build a thriving organization is to give people the freedom to think, to question, and to challenge the status quo. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That sounds great in theory, but how do I actually create psychological safety in my boardroom? Well, let me break it down for you. It starts with leadership. If you're the person at the top, if you're the founder, the CEO, or the chair of the board, you set the tone. You have to model vulnerability. You have to admit when you don't know something. You have to invite pushback. And most importantly, you have to reward honesty, even when it stings, because here's the deal. People follow the leader. If they see you shutting down ideas, dismissing concerns, or punishing mistakes, they're going to play it safe. They're going to stick to the script. They're going to avoid rocking the boat. But if they see you asking questions, admitting fault, and celebrating candor, they're going to step up. They're going to lean in. They're going to bring their best selves to the table. And that's where the magic happens. Let me tell you about a young entrepreneur I met a few years ago. He had just raised his first round of funding and was preparing to scale his startup. He came to me with a problem. Everyone on my team agrees with everything I say. I don't know if I'm getting the truth. Sound familiar? So I asked him a simple question. When was the last time someone disagreed with you in a meeting? He thought for a minute and said, I don't remember anyone ever disagreeing with me. That's when I knew we had work to do. We talked about the importance of creating space for disagreement. We worked on techniques to invite feedback. He started asking open-ended questions. He stopped interrupting. He thanked people for speaking up, even when he didn't like what they had to say. And within months, the dynamic changed. His team started challenging ideas. They uncovered flaws in their product roadmap. They spotted potential risks before they became crises. And guess what happened? Their revenue doubled. That's the power of psychological safety. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. Creating a culture where people feel safe to speak up takes work. It takes humility. It takes intentionality. But the payoff is enormous, because when people feel safe, they show up differently, they engage differently, they contribute differently, and that leads to better strategic decisions. Think about it. When you're surrounded by people who are afraid to tell you the truth, you end up making decisions in a vacuum. You're flying solo, relying on incomplete information and hoping for the best. But when you have a team that feels empowered to speak up, you gain access to insights you never would have seen on your own. You get early warnings about problems. You uncover hidden opportunities. You make smarter moves faster. That's not just good management. That's smart business. And if you're thinking about the future of your company, I want you to ask yourself this. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? Do you want to be known as the leader who silenced voices and missed opportunities? Or do you want to be known as the leader who created a space for bold ideas, honest conversations, and game-changing strategies? The choice is yours. Now, let's talk about the journey to your first million. Because whether you're a young entrepreneur starting out or a seasoned executive leading a Fortune 500 company, the principles remain the same. Success doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from asking the right questions, surrounding yourself with the right people, and building a culture where everyone feels safe to contribute. And that includes the boardroom. You see, the road to your first million is paved with decisions, big decisions, small decisions, risky decisions, and sometimes painful ones. But the best decisions come from places where people feel safe to speak the truth, where ideas are debated, tested, and refined, where failure is seen not as a reason to punish, but as a stepping stone to growth. So if you're serious about hitting that first million, or scaling beyond it, you need to start with the foundation, psychological safety. Because without it, you're just guessing. With it, you're positioning yourself and your entire organization for long-term success. Now, I want to speak directly to the younger generation, the next wave of entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders. Listen up. This is your time. You've got fresh ideas, bold dreams, and a hunger to make your mark. But don't fall into the trap of thinking that leadership means having all the answers. Real leadership means knowing what you don't know and being humble enough to learn from others. Psychological safety is not a weakness. It's a superpower. It's what separates average teams from extraordinary ones. It's what turns good companies into industry leaders. And it's what gives young entrepreneurs the confidence to take risks, speak up, and drive change. So here's my challenge to you. Don't wait for permission to speak up. Don't hold back because you're afraid of offending someone or rocking the boat. Your voice matters, your perspective matters, and if you find yourself in a place where your voice isn't valued, then it's time to find a new place, because the world needs your ideas, the economy needs your energy, and the boardroom needs your honesty. And to every leader listening right now, I want you to ask yourself one question. Are you creating a space where people feel safe enough to tell the truth? If not, then it's time to make a change, because the cost of silence is too high, the price of ego is too steep, and the opportunity in front of us is too big to squander. So let's stop pretending that leadership is about control. Let's stop hiding behind titles and authority. Let's stop rewarding conformity and start celebrating courage. Because when people feel safe, they rise. When teams communicate openly, they innovate. And when companies embrace psychological safety, they win. And winning isn't just about profits, it's about purpose. It's about progress. It's about building something that lasts. So here's your call to action. Start today, right now. Whether you're leading a team of 10 or a company of 10,000, commit to creating a culture where people feel safe to speak up. Ask hard questions, invite pushback, reward honesty, and above all, lead with integrity. Because the future belongs to the brave, to the bold, to the ones who dare to speak up when others stay silent. And that starts in the boardroom, so don't just sit there. Lead, speak, act, build. Because the next chapter of your company's story is being written right now, and it begins with a single, courageous conversation.